welcome to the City Club of Portland Friday Forum. City Club is where we bring civic-minded people together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and play. I'm Sharon Van Sickle Robbins, former president of City Club and current member of the Friday Forum Committee, and I would like to welcome members and guests alike, those of you who join us today here at the Sentinel Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensure we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partner, Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Bank of the Cascades, Family Care Health Plans, Legacy Health, Russell Fellow Properties, The Standard, and Stoll Reeves. We're grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a round warm of applause. Civic scholars from Madison High School are in the audience with us today. Civics, woohoo! Civic Scholars is our initiative to expand opportunities for high school students to more deeply engage in Portland's civic issues, bringing civic education out of the classroom and into our community. This morning, prior to the forum, they had their own Q&A with today's speakers. Students, please stand if you're able, and welcome to Friday Forum. For next week's program, we've partnered with Willamette Valley Development Officers on their 2015 regional conference, The Power of Enoughness. On stage, we'll have Hildy Gottlieb, social scientist and asker of powerful questions. Hildy will share what she and her team at Creating the Future have learned in over 15 years of research and experimentation into the factors that create social change. You can learn more about club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, we'll be live tweeting today's program. You can follow along and join the conversation using the hashtag PDXCityClub. After our program, Rahi Reddy will facilitate a Q&A session with our panelists. The first question will come from one of our civic scholars. Members, please come to the microphone and ask a question. For all of our audience members, please locate the index cards in the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. Hold your cards up high, and City Club staff will come and collect the questions prior to the start of the Q&A. And now for our program. Dr. Ellen Scott is a professor of sociology and women's and gender studies at the University of Oregon. She has conducted research and co-authored the report, The High Cost of Low Wages, and will be presenting their findings and stories to us today. After her report, we will hear responses from two additional guests. Justin Kurtzen is a co-founder of 15 Now PDX, a group that seeks to increase the minimum wage in Portland to $15. Joseph Price has worked as a passenger service assistant, assisting passengers in wheelchairs, and as a line coordinator at Portland International Airport for the past 4 years. Joseph and his co-workers make the Oregon state minimum wage, now $9.25 an hour, and have been organizing a union with SEIU Local 49 for the past year, seeking fair wages and access to affordable benefits. The conversation will be moderated by Rahi Reddy, a faculty member at the Labor Education and Research Center at the University of Oregon. She's the coordinator of the Low Wage Economy Initiative and supported the development of this report. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage.
Thank you, Sharon. Oh, is the mic on? Okay, great. So good afternoon to all of you here at the City Club, and I wanted to just first thank the City Club of Portland for inviting us to really take on this really important conversation and timely conversation about how we raise standards for working families throughout the state. So as we talked about before, and as Sharon mentioned, I'm one of the co-authors with Ellen Scott, Daniel Morris, who's here in the audience, Shauna Dyer, who's here in the audience, and Bob Bussell, of a report on the high cost of low wages. You know, President Obama, in his State of the Union address, really put the issues of middle-class economics front and center of his State of the Union address. And when he described middle-class economics, he said it's the idea the country does best when everyone gets the fair shot. Everyone does their fair share and everyone plays by the same set of rules. And part of that agenda included really making sure that everyone in the United States has paid sick leave, which seems like a basic necessity. As someone who is currently suffering from a cold, I can tell you it's important. And additional things like, you know, raising wages and providing affordable childcare. And he did address the issue of raising the minimum wage specifically, and throughout the challenge, which I think is something I would, you know, have all of you think about, which is, you know, if you truly believe you could work full-time and support a family on less than $15,000 a year, try it. If not, vote to give millions of the hardest working people in America a raise. In Oregon, thank President Obama. In Oregon, the state minimum wage is $9.25 an hour. It's one of the few states in the country that links an increase in the minimum wage to the CPI. But someone working full-time hours at $9.25 an hour, and we will hear from one of our guests who can talk about this directly, but we're talking about earning a little over $18,000 a year. And we know low wages is not just about minimum wage, and what Ellen will be talking about is a little bit to expand this idea of low wage is not just minimum wage, but it's not earning enough to meet the basic necessities of life, the basic necessities of raising a family and the basic necessities of putting a roof over your head. And we also know that in the state of Oregon, women are more likely to be low-wage workers at 75% of all workers in the most common low-wage occupations are women, and 60% of all minimum wage workers. So this is really this issue of low-wage work is also a gender issue. So Jeff Mapeson commented in the Oregonian that President Obama's State of the Union proposals could have been made in Oregon. In Oregon, there are actually several initiatives on being moved right now in the state legislature to advance guaranteed paid sick days for every working Oregonian in the state, to raise the minimum wage, expand childcare affordability and access, and to help all workers have some form of secure retirement. These are really important measures that are happening on a statewide level. And then on the local level, we are seeing efforts right here in Multnomah County. We want to applaud our county commissioners here in Multnomah who help raise the wages for their lowest paid workers in the county through the help of the labor unions in that county. Now, the wage floor for Multnomah County workers is $15 an hour. And we will be hearing today a little bit, and there's information at the tables talking about this. The Port of Portland is now looking at advancing an effort to pass some minimum standards, labor standards for all contractors who contract with the Port of Portland, which includes the Portland Airport, and the City of Portland is also looking at the same policies. So we see statewide and locally a real interest in raising these standards. So today we're going to spend some time actually talking about why do we need to pass these policies, what's at stake here in Oregon, and who is impacted. And we're going to have a really engaging conversation that will be first led by our amazing co-author of our report, The High Cost of Low Wages, Dr. Ellen Scott.
Thanks, Rahi, and thank you all for being here. It's really a tremendous opportunity for us to have this conversation today, and I anticipate it will be a lively one. Low wages are costly to the state. What do I mean by that? Low wages are insufficient to support a family. Because they cannot support their families on low-wage work, many, about half of all low-wage workers in Oregon, rely on public benefits to make ends meet. That means that Oregon's taxpayers are subsidizing corporations who have realized unprecedented profits in recent years. Used to be that we expected employers, especially large corporations, to pay what we called a family wage. That is, a salary that could support a family and benefits such as health insurance and paid sick leave. This is no longer the case for America's working class. This hurts Oregon. We could be spending our tax dollars on other necessary public goods, like roads, public services, education, for example. And this hurts Oregon's families who struggle to survive on very low wages, even when they receive public assistance from the state. So who are Oregon's low-wage workers? Over 400,000 Oregonians make less than $12 an hour. That's about 25% of all the workers. 65% of these are women, 20% are people of color, and contrary to the assumption that low-wage workers are teens, in fact, they are overwhelmingly adults. The average age is 35. And low-wage jobs are disproportionately located in rural areas of the state, whereas in the Portland metro area, about 22% of the workers earn less than $10 an hour. In Eastern Oregon, that is 50% of the workers. So where are they employed? Nearly 75% of all low-wage workers in Oregon fall into 5 major occupational categories: sales and retail, food preparations and service, personal care services, building and grounds cleaning and maintenance, and health care. While the growth in Oregon's economy since 2001 has outpaced that of the nation by 3 times, this has not translated to job growth except at the bottom of the labor market. Although the growth has been due to the computer and electronics industry, there's been a 25% decrease in jobs in that sector. And between 2007 and 2010, Oregon lost 155,000 jobs, about half in manufacturing and construction, jobs which pay a living wage. While we are recovering, we are still seeing the majority of job growth in jobs we can't export, those in the service industry and in retail. The very jobs in which most low-wage workers are employed are the ones that have seen growth overall since 1990. So how much are those workers relying on public benefits? 197,000 working adults in Oregon received food stamps in January of 2014. Their wages averaged $11,248 in 2013, and their average wage was $12.36 per hour, but they worked less than half of full-time employment on average. They prefer to work full-time. We estimate conservatively that Oregon spends $1.7 billion in public assistance costs for these workers and their families. Major corporations, employ the largest number of low-wage workers who rely on public assistance. And who are those corporations, and what do their profits look like? In 2007, the Oregon Department of Human Services released a list of employers with the most workers enrolled in SNAP or receiving medical assistance. The top 10 employers were Walmart, Sprint Call Center, McDonald's, Safeway, Bear Creek Corporation or Harry and David, Taco Bell, Burger King, Subway, Labor Ready Temp Services, and Target. And what did their profits look like? Well, Walmart realized a mere $17.2 billion in profits, McDonald's $5.6 billion, Target $2.4 billion, Safeway $3.5 billion. I think you get the picture. Additionally, Oregon's businesses enjoy the lowest business tax rate in the nation. We are dead last on that measure. And the safety net to which corporations are not contributing at rates comparable in other states is a critical piece of their ability to hire workers at such low wages. The safety net was designed to help people when they're going through tough times, hard times, not as a source of permanent support for workers employed in profitable industries. So let's turn now to the families, the people most affected by the low-wage labor market. And to give you a sense of their lives, I'm going to rely on 44 interviews conducted with low-wage workers in Western Oregon, all of them at the time recipients of Oregon's child care subsidies to enable them to work. The parents we interviewed were mostly women, and 64% of them were white, 36% were people of color, 18% had less than a high school education, 36% had a high school diploma or a GED, 41% had some college, and 5% had a BA degree. They had an average of 2.7 children, and the average age of the parents was 32. 77% of them lived in single-parent households, 30% had children with special needs, and 55% had serious health problems or disabilities themselves. Based on their reports of hours and wages, we estimated their average monthly income to be $1,300 gross, a shockingly low wage given the average family size of 2.7 children. And because their wages were so low, they were forced to rely on a variety of various combinations of public benefits. 56% of those we interviewed had no health insurance available to them through work, and many who did not use it because it was too expensive. Their children were typically covered by OHP, and this is before the Affordable Care Act, I should qualify. But the women usually had been fairly recently kicked off of OHP, and they were going without important medications and treatments because they couldn't afford to purchase the health care out of pocket. Most of the parents we interviewed still received child care subsidies through the state. As I said, they also received SNAP benefits, and some had a housing subsidy. Quite simply, they couldn't manage without these state benefits. In their case, critical work supports that allow them to sustain their families despite earning such low wages. And repeatedly, they said to us, without a child care subsidy, it would be impossible for them to work at all because their earnings were too low to pay for care. This is what Mimi told us. She is the white mother of 4 who works in food services, and I'll let you hear in her own voice what she had to say about this.
It's everything to me. Without that, I would not be successful at all. I'm so grateful for that program, you have no idea. I would suffer. Me and my kids, I mean, we were barely even staying alive then. And now, if my kids need something, if I need to get pull-ups for my son, I can go buy them. Before I couldn't.
Wow.
I'd have to try to make sure I had enough for a month. And if I didn't, I had to borrow money. Yeah. And so that daycare that they're giving me and helping me with, it's everything. It gives my kids everything. So I'm grateful for that program. It helps a lot of people out.
Most of the others made similar remarks. Martha, the white single mother of 2 working as a server in a restaurant, reported, "There's no way, if you didn't have state care babysitting, I could afford $600 or $700 a month, $800 a month in child care costs with 2 kids. I barely make $900 a month right now with the $324 in child support." And Mary, a white single mother of 3 children working at a rehabilitation facility as a CNA, said, "I could work, but I'd be living out of a box or my car, because how do you pay rent and pay for your daycare? So I'm glad that we do have a subsidy, so then I can work and do what I'm supposed to do." The parents we interviewed relied on public benefits because their wages were very low, their hours were often part-time, and their employers provided relatively few workplace benefits. And of the parents we interviewed, 39% had paid sick leave, 39% did not, and 22% had access to some kind of paid leave which they were told they might be able to use for sick leave, but often that was not, in fact, the case. And their stories are riddled with the difficulties of caring for sick children or for themselves when they did not have sick leave. Some lost jobs as a result. For example, Tabitha, a Hispanic mother of 2, worked in manufacturing. Her job was not family-friendly. The employer was very strict about punctuality, and each minute she arrived late or each day that she missed counted towards a tally of work time missed. And she did miss work because she had a son who had asthma, and sometimes she had to stay at home with him or take him to the hospital. Ultimately, she lost this job due to her absences. And Tori, the African-American single mother of 1, worked for Subway in a job that was completely inflexible. She was allowed no time off for illness, and when she had to have a scheduled surgery and she informed her boss ahead of time that she would need to miss work, she was told, "Too bad." She said, They let me go because I had surgery. And after a short period of relying on unemployment, she found another job, but she had that job only for 3 weeks. Her mother was hospitalized, and she had no alternative care for her daughter. So again, she missed work, and again, she was fired. Job churning is another critical problem among low-wage workers. The majority of our respondents reported changing jobs and/or having spells of unemployment during the 2-year period that we reviewed with them. Parents cycled in and out of employment because jobs were temporary, they were unable to make ends meet, and they sought better jobs. They were let go after periods of missed work due to illness and family crisis. The job ended due to the recession and industry decline, or for reasons that weren't provided by the employer. Evidence from our recent follow-up interviews suggests that these patterns have continued despite improvements in the economy. Jill, the Native American mother of 1 son and a single parent with some college, worked for a couple of years as a janitor for a large nonprofit agency, doing graveyard shifts and double shifts when she could fill in for someone else. But she was terminated shortly after we first interviewed her. She was unemployed for a year before she found on-call work at a residential home for children with social, emotional, behavioral disorders. She was employed there only briefly, and then she moved in with her grandmother to provide hospice care. She relied on TANF for 2 years, and when we re-interviewed her, she had been diagnosed with a health problem that prohibited her from doing physical labor, and she was also being treated for serious mental health problems. Tori, who I mentioned earlier, had cycled through a number of jobs found through the TANF Jobs program. All of the jobs were temporary. They were subsidized through the jobs program, and none transitioned into permanent positions. She had her own work disruptions. She experienced a terrible violent assault in her home, and this physically and emotionally disabled her for a long period. She had another baby and subsequently experienced a chronic breast infection for which she was hospitalized. When her son was an infant, though, she took more job training classes and she went into more temporary positions through the jobs program. None of them materialized as permanent positions, and luckily she consistently received a Section 8 housing subsidy, SSI for a daughter who's autistic, and OHP for the entire family. The majority of the parents we originally interviewed experienced erratic employment schedules and non-standard shifts, again quite common for low-wage workers. Some were allowed to have input into their new schedules, but most did not have this privilege. Terry, a white single mother of 2 who worked at a large box store, said, "They'd say you're going to have a set schedule, and you'd work 2 months, and everybody's happy, and the kids are well adjusted, and then we're going to change your schedule." Terry was able to manage her constantly changing schedule, in large part because her mother took care of her children and was paid through employment-related child care funding, and her mother was able to be completely flexible. However, finding a replacement for her mother when her mother died unexpectedly was very difficult because of the flexibility required of a child care provider. Terry ultimately left her job after 10 years because of a shoulder injury that prevented her from doing the physical labor required of her. And in the time between 1997 and 2007 at that job, her wages went from $7.50 an hour to $12.50 an hour with 1.5 weeks of vacation. She had no other benefits. Because of the shoulder injury, Terry spent 2 years relying on TANF while she healed. She was told she was not eligible to apply for temporary disability coverage. And some parents, like Jill, had regular shifts, but in order to accrue enough hours, they worked on call, which meant, again, irregular shifts and irregular days. And Jill, as I said, worked as a janitor for a large nonprofit. She did her 3 graveyard shifts. She did her scheduled swing shift, but then she did varying days and double shifts to fill in when employees were absent. And she told us, "I work with one agency, but in that one agency, I got a regular job and 3 on-call jobs. And another agency is just on-call." Again, this life of erratic scheduling was possible for Jill because she either took her son to her mother's for subsidized care, or her son was asleep in his bed at home when her roommate was there. Having flexible caregivers is a requirement in managing this life of erratic work schedules. As the stories make clear, finding stable childcare is an imperative for working parents, particularly working single mothers. Finding reliable, trustworthy, high-quality care is particularly challenging for parents with low earnings, erratic schedules, and non-standard hours. As I said earlier, without the subsidies, paying for childcare would be simply impossible. Even with the subsidies, parents who worked erratic schedules or non-standard hours were sometimes forced to choose providers who were not reliable or who didn't provide high-quality care. Because jobs are hard to find, parents tended to stick with the arrangements even when they weren't satisfactory. However, when things got really bad, they sought alternative care because, as they told us, their children come first. The parents we interviewed struggled to make ends meet in low-wage work. They often juggle multiple jobs or do extra shifts in order to increase their income. They accommodate just-in-time scheduling, graveyard or evening shifts, and changing schedules, despite the challenges to childcare and family life. Still, the wages they earn and the hours they work are simply inadequate to support a family. Some attempt to escape their low-wage jobs by increasing their educational attainment, only to incur substantial debt with no improved access to better jobs. They told us they felt that they were doing everything they were supposed to do, but could not overcome the obstacles. Indeed, they were often one step away from catastrophes such as homelessness or debilitating illness or disability. And I'll conclude now with Abby's story, which illustrates this. Abby is the white single mother of 4. She left a job at a call center because her earnings were insufficient to cover the family's basic needs, and she was about to be evicted for non-payment of rent. After a period of homelessness, she moved her family to another state and worked for a bill collection agency before moving back to Oregon, where she again experienced periods of homelessness and was unemployed. She was able to get on OHP and have necessary dental work done that involved having most of her teeth removed and replaced with dentures. After months of dental work, she went back to school and she earned an AA degree, hoping to transfer to a 4-year institution. But managing school and family had been too much for her at that point. So after another period of homelessness, Abby finally got the housing subsidy she critically needed to stabilize her family. And she eventually found a job in a fast food restaurant earning $9.20 an hour with no benefits. And I think it's fitting that I conclude now with Abby's words about working a minimum wage job.
I like my job for the most part. I mean, it doesn't pay much and it's not a ton of hours, but with, finally getting a little help with housing, I can actually breathe for a minute and just say, okay, well, I just graduated college with really good grades and now I can just work at Arby's for a little while and figure out what the next step is to improving something. I haven't done a lot of research into the whole higher minimum wage thing, but I did just recently kind of comment about it because after 9 months of working at Arby's and minimum wage was $9.10 at the time, I got a 10-cent raise. Yeah. And now minimum wage is going up to $9.25. So it's really going to be like, I didn't really get a raise, or like I only got a 5-cent raise. And just things start going up. It's like $4.50 now for a pound of, meat, and, rent goes up, and $1,200 for a 3-bedroom house, and you can't even make that much 40 hours a week on minimum wage anyway, so we're stuck in a little tiny place. That's way too small for us, and stuff I just feel like it does go up a little bit more, and, 10 cents an hour when it doesn't do anything for you. And that's what, I don't know. I think it's going to be a long process before anybody really figures out a way to work it out where it's really going to work. There's not a lot of ways to make enough money to do anything. And I work pretty hard, even though I'm just a, fast food worker. People say, oh, well, you don't deserve to make enough money to live because you work at Arby's, but I work pretty hard.
And that was hard to hear, so I just want to say at the end, she says, people say I don't deserve to make much money because I work at Arby's, but she says, I don't know, I work really hard. So let's make sure we hear that part. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ellen. I wanted to turn now to a couple of our respondents here to just get your initial reactions to this, to Ellen's presentation, and kind of tell us what you're thinking now as you hear these stories and you hear a little bit more about the low-wage workforce that Ellen described. So first I wanted to turn to Joseph Price, who works at Portland Airport, to just give us some of your reactions.
Yes, I'm Joseph Price, and I work at PDX for a company called Huntley. And we service the airlines. Don't work for the airlines, but we service the airlines. And I identify with the two people you heard on the tape. I make a minimum wage, $9.25, but I work a 40-hour week, which makes it a little better. But it ain't, $9.25 is not livable. It needs to be more. The minimum wage needs to be raised. We need benefits. We need to be treated with respect, and at PDX, it's not a lack of money, just a lack of people caring at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So Justin from 15 now, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, my first thoughts are really kind of dismay at the fact that our economic system is failing so many people. Hardworking people, mothers with kids to feed, people who work full time, but still don't make enough to make ends meet and keep their heads above water. I mean, these are the people that we help when we raise the minimum wage. No one who works deserves to live in poverty. Everyone who works deserves the respect and the dignity of a living wage, a wage that allows them to take care of themselves and their families without relying on public assistance. A $15 minimum wage, that means $32,000 a year for a person who's working full-time. It's the number that gets working families in Oregon out of poverty and off of public assistance. And people are increasingly coming to understand that raising the minimum wage is a vital part of the solution to growing income inequality here in the state of Oregon and across the country. 29 states and 17 cities now have higher minimum wages than the federal minimum. In 4 states this past November, conservative states, voters overwhelmingly approved minimum wage increases. And the fight for 15 in particular has really inspired so many people in Oregon and across the country because people understand that anything less than 15 really just isn't enough. 15 really is a reasonable number. I mean, if the federal minimum wage had tracked growth in production in this country over the last 40 or 15 years, it would be over $20 per hour right now, okay? Living wage studies show that here in Oregon, $15 an hour is the bare minimum that a single individual, let alone someone with kids to feed, needs in order to be able to afford the basic necessities, right? Adequate housing, food, transportation, health insurance, maybe even have a little bit left over at the end of the month to save for emergencies. Excuse me. And so, when we look within this larger context, we really see that a $15 an hour minimum wage is actually, it's a fairly conservative demand. And it's a demand that is really gaining significant momentum here. Since November, park rangers in the city of Portland have won a $15 minimum wage. Home Forward employees, it's the former Portland Housing Authority, they've won 15. Like was mentioned earlier, Multnomah County employees have won a $15 minimum wage. Mayor Hales, in his State of the City speech, talked about moving the fair wage policy for contract workers to 15 and starting to move some city workers up to 15. We've been pressuring City Council for almost a year to do this, and now they're finally starting to move on it, and we're really excited about that. And at the state level, too, our bill to allow cities to raise the minimum wage themselves. It has 18 legislative sponsors. Our bill for a statewide $15 minimum wage has 16 sponsors. And it's really co-opted the whole statewide conversation on raising the minimum wage here in Oregon, $15 an hour. Because people here in Oregon, they hold the value that no one who works should live in poverty. And we understand that here in our state, 15 is just not enough.
Thank you for that. So I wanted to, get into it a little bit with our guests here, and try to address some, common criticisms there are out there of doing all of this kind of broad agenda around raising standards. So I wanted to ask you, Ellen, some of the recent there's been some recent analysts have said, well, if you raise the wage to $15 an hour, all it will do is just force folks off of public assistance and leave them worse off. And I wanted to get your reaction to that and share with us what you think about that.
I appreciate the question, Rahi. It's a good one. Benefits are supposed to go down. as wages go up. That's the point, that they are to help us in emergency times, help us when our wages are very low, help us in hopefully a temporary period of not being able to make ends meet and support our families. So by design, benefits do decrease as our wages go up. In reality, the benefits cliff is much lower than $15 an hour. Let's be clear about that. Benefits taper off at about the federal poverty level, which is an hourly wage of about $9.52 an hour for a family of 3. So that gives you an idea. If we went right to $15 an hour, there would be long leaving those benefits behind and the capacity to purchase those basic needs that one couldn't purchase before when you're relying on food stamps to get enough food for the family. Now, it is true for those workers who might be very part-time workers at $15 an hour, or if we chose to implement a higher minimum wage incrementally and very slowly, there is a reality of a benefits cliff. And I frankly have interviewed people who said to me, I've refused a 10-cent raise because I was going to lose my food stamps or I was going to lose my child care subsidy. So there is, in that much lower wage, in the $9, $10 an hour, there is that danger. Well, my response to that is that that is a political question that we can resolve by raising eligibility levels, by managing our system in such a way that people who are in that kind of crisis do continue to get the benefits that they need and deserve as they move up the wage scale. Again, as I said, that would only be an issue if we increased minimum wage at a very slow, incremental pace. Then we would need to figure out probably raising eligibility standards and including people for a longer period of time, or if we bump it up to $14 or $15 an hour, if there are people who are working very few hours, they will continue to need some assistance. But we can do that.
So Joseph, what would a $15 minimum wage do for your life and what you're experiencing right now?
What it would do for me, I would appreciate just the idea of, I work at the airport, but I can't afford to fly out of town. I would like to go visit my family. I have family that live in the Southeast. I would love to visit them. I would just like to take a trip. You go to the doctor office, they always ask you, have you been out of the country? And I tell them, not physically, you know. They say, you been around with anybody who been out of the country? I say, well, work at the airport. What you think, you know? So, yeah, I would love to be able to travel. I would love to be able to just pay my bills on time. Just have some extra cash, you know. Do that. And like purchase a car someday. I ride TriMet. When you ride TriMet, you got to pay. If you don't pay and you get caught, you wish you had bought a ticket, because they really don't take no stuff. They just slap you with a fine. So I have to buy a ticket, make sure I can ride back and forth to work. I mean, it's convenient. You have the buses, the train take you right to work, but you must have a ticket to go to work. You have to pay for your ticket to get there. So it's so many things you're able to do with the extra money that you can't do when you don't have it. Thank you.
Ellen?
Yeah, I also wanted to add that a $15 minimum wage, when workers prosper, communities prosper. And most of those, probably for all of these families, those extra dollars are not going into luxury goods. They're going into purchasing the necessary goods that they cannot currently purchase at $9 an hour. So they're buying more food in the supermarkets. They're buying those sneakers for those kids that they previously got at Goodwill. They are buying the winter jackets they can't afford. Those dollars are circulating right back into the community. So when that happens, of course, the businesses are prospering as well.
That's an interesting point that I wanted to talk about too. Is, you know, we talked about government, and I wanted to talk about businesses and employers right now. So I was doing my research for this panel and looking at recent polling of small business owners. There were about 3 recent polls that I looked at, one conducted by the Department of Labor just last year, one by Quinlan Greenberg, and another one by the more conservative-leaning Gallup. And on all the polls, when small business owners are directly asked about whether they support raising minimum wage, that there is support for raising the wage. But we also know that, as we can read in the paper and see, as Justin mentioned, in efforts in legislatures across the country, that industry groups do challenge that, industry groups representing small businesses. So I guess the question to you all is, what do you think about that? What impacts are there to small businesses and businesses of raising not only the minimum wage, but also some of these other labor standards like paid sick leave?
Well, I mean, I think we've already sort of touched on it, at least in terms of the minimum wage. It's I think a pretty simple fact that when more people have more money to spend, that benefits our local businesses and our small businesses. If people can't afford to buy the things that are being offered, the goods and services that are being offered by our small businesses, then our small businesses suffer. And when we look at real, actual minimum wage increases that have happened, we see that in states that have higher minimum wages and that raise their minimum wage, small businesses actually thrive, and they actually grow faster than in states that have lower minimum wages. I mean, and at a more local level, I think the city of San Jose is a great example. They raised their minimum wage by $2 per hour all at once in 2013. And over the course of the next year, small business retail registrations in the city went up by over 19%. The restaurant industry in the city of San Jose, which the restaurant and hospitality industry is considered the most sensitive when it comes to minimum wage fluctuations, and they added 4,000 jobs in the city of San Jose over the course of the next year after this pretty large minimum wage increase. And so I think it's clear that when, again, more people have more money to spend, our businesses, they thrive and they do better. And I think small businesses here in Oregon understand that too. In fact, just this past week, the Main Street Alliance of Oregon came out and endorsed a $15 minimum wage because they understand this fact. The business owners that they represent understand that in order for their businesses to be successful, people need to be able to afford to buy their services and their goods.
And Joseph, you work for a contractor in the city of Portland, where we passed a paid sick days law a couple of years ago, and the implementation is happening. Can you tell us what's happened to your contractor and your business, the company you work for?
Well, they're still thriving. They're going ahead. They're doing well. And the company I work for is not a small business. It's a nationwide business. It's like it works at all the airports practically in the country. So it's not a small business, so they just keep thriving. And for us passing that sick day thing, it wasn't told here in Portland at PDX that we had the 6 day. You heard about it through the grapevine. You didn't know that you had it until one of my friends, coworkers, was out sick, and she said, well, this is what I did to get this is what I did to get this. So, thank you for telling me. But no, for the company itself telling you this, you did not know this.
That's really, I think one of the challenges is on all of these laws is to really ensure that we fund enforcement, to ensure that people know that they have these laws. But one of the things you're saying that really resounded to me is, what is a small business? This is a company that works here in the city and is still thriving even after having to implement this new paid sick days law. Ellen?
Just another thing I wanted to add about the impact of a higher minimum wage for businesses. Study after study has shown that this reduces worker turnover, and it's very expensive to have high worker turnover. The costs of either retention or the costs of retraining are very high, and by one estimate, 20 to 25% of the annual wage of one worker is saved by not having that worker turn over. So there are actually savings in job stability, in worker stability, and lower worker turnover.
So I think we're getting to the end of our session here with our guests, and we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. I would say just a few parting words before we open up for Q&A is, time after time, I think Ellen has pointed, many studies have been done nationally about the impacts of raising labor standards, impacts to our neighbors in the north up in Seattle and SeaTac, our neighbors to the south in California and San Francisco and San Jose. And every study, I encourage folks to look them up and to read them, because what we do know is when we look at these studies and look at the understanding of what happens when you raise standards, it's really about bringing billions of dollars back into the economy and really infusing it into the consumers and to the folks that actually help us grow our economy. So I encourage all of you to look at that, and also you can find our report on lerc.uoregon.edu, a free downloadable report for you to share with your folks. Okay, so we'll open it up to Q&A.
Bill Dickey, City Club member. I think of myself as well, first of all, just in case anybody in the audience doesn't have an iPhone with them, the governor announced that he's resigning during lunch today, so that kind of makes me sad. Two, I'm an empathetic guy. I think people in the community know me as being a generous person, I try to give back to the community, and so on and so forth. The thing about the minimum wage, one of the things that gets in my craw on this minimum wage conversation is that you guys have, is that you imply that you're the hardest working people. And I think you all work hard, but I think there are a lot of other people that work hard too. So my guy making $17 an hour is working just as hard as your guy making $9.25 an hour. It's probably nothing, but it does stick in my craw for some reason or another. My question to you is, my lowest wage is, I think, $12.50 an hour at the starting wage. It ranks up through experience and time on the job and so on and so forth to like $27 an hour. So I have full-time pressmen making $75,000 a year in a good year with lots of overtime. What happens if my $12 an hour guy gets bumped to 15, and my $15 an hour guy is going to say, hey, I deserve 17. My 17's going to want 19, and boom, 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 boom. I'm not related to the Walmart family. So we did armchair mathematics on this. It would cost my company $200,000 to put this wage in. That's more money than I make in a year. And I just sort of wonder, what is the reality of the middle American businesses that are providing health insurance like we do, vacation pay, sick pay, all the full benefits? Are we supposed to just bump everybody up, to make it work? Or how's that going to fly?
Do any of you want to take that?
Yeah, we know, I think you're a perfect example of, our small business leaders tend to care about their employees, right? I mean, you're not Walmart or McDonald's, right? You already pay, you said your lowest paid employees are at about $12.50. You're already paying above the minimum wage. But what ultimately, when we look at things in the broad perspective, when people don't make enough money to survive, then our economy suffers. And so when wages have been stagnant for decades, right? I mean, cost of living is going up, business is booming, right? We heard that the economy in Oregon and business in Oregon has been growing at 3 times the national rate. Yet wages are still stagnant. And it's been that way for far too long, and it's time for wages to catch up, right? It's time for working people, again, to be able to afford the things that they need to buy. And so, when the wage floor comes up, it moves everybody up. They call it wage compression, is sort of the term that's used to describe when wages come up, and then people who are already sort of at that floor are all of a sudden making the same as minimum wage workers. And the way that is sort of addressed and dealt with is wage expansion, where the person who's making $15 or $16 an hour does get a bump in pay also to sort of maintain that internal pay scale. And I think it's easy to look at the cost side of our budget sheets and our balance sheets, right? When we're looking at these future minimum wage increases and how they're going to affect our businesses, without taking into account the other side of the spreadsheet and the benefits that the businesses are going to see, right? The savings on not having as high of turnover, the increased business that you're going to see as a result of more people having more money to spend. And so I would say yes, when the wage floor goes up, we want to see the wages for other people go up as well, particularly because we've been sitting on stagnant wages for far too long. And if our economies are really going to thrive and grow again, then wages need to start increasing so that people can afford to live here.
And I think just one other point is, what we've seen in Oregon in the last 30 years is wage polarization and job polarization in the state. Our state economist issued a really incredible report that people should read about job polarization. And what we know is that those middle wage jobs that you're talking about are really disappearing. And one of the realities for many businesses is how do you compete and be a good business owner who's providing these benefits, not just a high wage, but also benefits to your employees and stay competitive in an economy that's constantly spiraling down. And I think what we've seen in some other cities and states is how do you raise the floor for everyone in order to at least mitigate some of that spiraling down of the economy. It doesn't answer everything that you're raising, but I think shows the really tough circumstance good business owners are in when competitors are not really paying even those kind of living wages with benefits. So next question.
Bill Homer, City Club member. My question is about corporate taxes, and I believe Dr. Scott, you mentioned that Oregon was dead last. Oregon has two corporate income tax rates, 6.6% and 7.6%. In 24 of the other 49 states, the highest corporate income tax rate is lower than the lowest Oregon corporate income tax rate. So I was surprised to read in your report and hear you say today that Oregon has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the country. The source cited in your report is from an accounting firm, which I also read, and that report states that the methodology it used, quote, does not provide sufficient information to evaluate a state's competitiveness. Now, I'm proud to be a member of the City Club of Portland because we pride ourselves on conducting rigorous, nonpartisan research. But your report implies that Oregon corporations are undertaxed. So my question is, why does your report fail to mention that at least 24 states have lower corporate income tax rates than Oregon?
Well, we actually, we would be happy to sit down with you after this and talk to you about that, and including one of our co-authors, Daniel Morris, who I think is in the audience here, and really happy to talk about that. I think it's a more complicated question than we can get to in the last few minutes of our Q&A, but please do find us, and we'd love to sit down and talk to you about that. Next question?
So, Tom Karwacki, City Club member. The question is going to be with their, of course, 2 weeks ago, $15 an hour, Charlie Hales, everybody applauds, and immediately Commissioner Fritz comes on TV and says, no, because it's going to have an impact, and I'd rather have the money go to benefits. So it's kind of an interesting perspective that maybe there'll be more incentives to not pay your employees, and that's the wage theft issue. And by increasing the wages and minimum wages, unless you're providing some enforcements, don't you give employers an incentive to somehow not pay the wages, either not paying the people that they're supposed to be paying. And it may be illegal, but it's a very long and difficult process to recover. So you're creating an incentive. And you'll have the same thing with the training wage as a result, which the state Senate in Washington just passed a training wage to go lower than what it is currently now. It won't pass, the governor won't sign it, but that's, you know, you create incentives, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's true. You know, Northwest Workers Justice Project is actually doing a lot of great work around the wage theft issue here in Portland and in the state of Oregon. And it's a serious concern. And yeah, you know, the higher wages are, the more likely you are to have employers who are trying to get around those laws. And it's one of the things that we're proposing in 15 Now PDX with the increase in the fair wage policy here in Portland to 15, is that a citizen review board with representatives from the labor community, you know, that represent the workers who are affected by this policy, that this review committee be implemented so that there can be some real oversight over the minimum wage law and the fair wage policy here in Portland. And in terms of training wages, and you know, the law that was just passed in Washington, we're adamantly we're fighting very hard to make sure that we don't have a reimplementation of training wages and sort of these, you know, teenage wages and tip credits and all of these things here in Oregon. We're not going to move backwards. We're moving forwards.
And I would add also that I would hate to see the possibility that some unscrupulous employers might do bad things become our reason not to do what is just for our workers, and that is to pay them a living wage.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Stefan Lindner. I'm a member of a city club. I'm also a research associate at the Urban Institute, which is a policy think tank in DC. I'm lucky enough to have an employer who lets me work flexible hours and is completely agnostic about where I work and at a good wage. I'm also visiting faculty at University of Oregon's 3PM, so I do a lot of policy work. And with all of that in mind, my question is, I think, more of a bit of a comment, but one thing I found really interesting when I listened to the way you talked, you know, about the situation of these people. And when you know, I found this very striking when you played some of these quotes, was that wages are one part of their issue, but it's not all. One really, really big part of this is flexibility of work, and the way how you are treated in terms of what is your schedule? Is your schedule changing all the time? Do you have any power over your schedule? Is it possible for you to come late to work if you have a child that is sick? So I guess my bigger picture idea here is that what you really want, what you really should strive for is not a minimum wage. What you really should strive for is a minimum standard in terms of how work is for people, how good it is for people. And that means wages, that means benefits, that means hours, flexibility of hours, all of these together. And I think that's something that might address the concern of these small business owners as well, because they provide a lot of good things to employers on issues that are not captured by minimum wage. And I think we should really take this all into consideration when we think about a policy that helps people at the bottom of income distribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I can't agree with you more. It's critical.
Really quickly, I'd just like to say that, you know, too, I agree that, you know, things like sick leave and secure retirement and full-time hours, you know, flexibility, these are all things that are important. They're all part of the overall solution when it comes to lifting up low-wage workers. But at the same time, you can't pay your rent, you can't buy groceries with your health insurance, unfortunately. And so, you know, while minimum wage and raising the minimum wage is only one part of the overall solution, I would argue that it's a really vital part of the solution, because ultimately it's that income, not the benefits that people need in order to be able to buy the things that they need to take care of their families.
Kurt Wabering, member. To what extent are the problems of low-income individuals and families and people also a problem of not working full-time? So if you don't work 40 hours, then you're not eligible for many of the benefits, and certainly you don't get the multiplier you get of working full-time times $15 an hour. So should the attention be as much to full-time employment as to minimum wage?
That's an excellent point. Most of the people that I interview, if they are not working full-time, and many of them are not working full-time, it is typically not by choice. It is by the employer's choice, and they can't get the hours they need. And indeed, the example I gave of the woman who's scrambling with her standard graveyard shifts and her one swing shift, and then she adds double shifts, she's just trying to get full-time work pieced together best she can. So absolutely, and this comes back to the previous comment about regulating the workforce so that employers are not in a position to piece together their employees so that they don't have to hire anybody full-time and thereby pay them benefits. I mean, regulating that is another critical piece of this patchwork of creating jobs at the bottom of the labor market that are decent jobs that people can live on and raise their families.
Hi, my name's Alicia Tran, and I had a question. I asked, if the minimum wages rise, would we expect the price of general goods to increase too, being that the employers would want more money?
Did you want to go ahead? Go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to respond that in the studies that have been done of higher minimum wage in the restaurant industry, it is true that employers have had to raise prices by a fairly small percentage, 0.25% is kind of the average. And so you're adding a quarter on a $10 bill. That's a piece of the story of how they managed to cover the higher wages that they're paying their employees. But we have not seen a situation in which prices across goods have skyrocketed in response to the higher minimum wage.
We have run out of broadcast time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. But as we close, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to our panelists, Dr. Ellen Scott, Justin Kurtzen, Joseph Price, and Rahi Reedy. Thank you.